Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he guided his old tractor back toward the barn. The Kansas wheat field stretched endlessly under the afternoon sun, golden waves rippling in the warm breeze. He had inherited this farm from his grandfather, along with the stubborn determination that kept him working the land despite 3 years of poor harvests and mounting debt. The peaceful rumble of his tractor engine suddenly competed with a strange whistling sound from above. Marcus looked up, squinting against the bright sky, expecting to see a military jet from the nearby air base. Instead, something massive and dark streaked overhead, trailing smoke and sparks. Whatever it was crashed into his back 40 with a thunderous impact that shook the ground beneath his tractor. Marcus killed the engine and jumped down, his heart pounding. In 28 years of farming, he had seen plenty of strange things fall from the sky, meteorites, weather balloons, even a spy satellite once. But nothing had ever hit his land with such force. A pillar of black smoke rose from beyond the hill where his winter wheat grew. He grabbed his rifle from the tractor cab, more out of habit than fear, and climbed into his pickup truck. The old Ford bounced and rattled as he drove across the rough field toward the crash site. As he crested the hill, Marcus slammed on the brakes and stared in disbelief. A massive crater gouged his wheat field, at least 50 feet across. At its center lay something that defied everything Marcus thought he knew about the world. It looked like a dragon from the fantasy books his daughter used to read, but this creature was real, breathing, and clearly in terrible pain. The being was enormous, easily 20 feet from snout to tail, covered in scales that shifted color between deep blue and silver in the sunlight. Its wings were torn and bleeding, one bent at an unnatural angle. Strange armor covered parts of its body, made from some metal Marcus had never seen before. The armor bore scorch marks and deep gashes, as if the creature had been in a fierce battle. Marcus sat in his truck for several minutes, engine idling, trying to process what he was seeing. The creature's massive chest rose and fell in labored breathing. One of its eyes, large as dinner plates and the color of liquid gold, fixed on him. There was intelligence there, and something else, pain, exhaustion, and perhaps desperation. Against every instinct screaming at him to drive away and call anyone, Marcus turned off his truck and stepped out. The creature tracked his movement, but made no aggressive moves. Up close, he could see that its injuries were severe. Dark fluid, probably blood, leaked from multiple wounds in its hide. The damaged wing twitched occasionally, sending visible waves of pain through the dragon's body. "Easy there, big fellow," Marcus said softly, using the same tone he used with injured livestock. "I'm not going to hurt you." The creature's head lifted slightly, and it made a sound, not quite a growl, not quite a whine. Marcus had spent his life around animals, and he recognized the sound of something in distress. Whatever this being was, wherever it had come from, it needed help. Marcus walked slowly back to his truck and retrieved his first aid kit, knowing it would be laughably inadequate for wounds this size. He also grabbed several clean towels and a bottle of water. The creature watched his every move, but remained still. "I don't know what you are or where you came from," Marcus said as he approached again, "but I've never been able to walk away from something that needed help." As he got closer, Marcus could see more details of the creature's condition. The armor it wore was incredibly sophisticated, with what looked like built-in technology that flickered weakly with damaged lights. Some kind of helmet lay nearby, cracked and smoking. This wasn't just some animal. This was a warrior, a soldier of some kind. Marcus knelt beside one of the smaller wounds on the creature's foreleg and began cleaning it with water and towels. The creature's skin was warm to the touch, almost fever hot, and the scales felt like smooth stone. To his amazement, the dragon-like being remained perfectly still, even as Marcus worked on its injuries. "That's it," Marcus murmured. "I know it hurts, but we need to get these wounds clean." The work was slow and difficult. Marcus had treated injured farm animals before, but nothing prepared him for the sheer size of this creature. Some wounds were too deep and large for his limited supplies. All he could do was clean them and try to stop the bleeding. As the sun began to set, Marcus realized he had been working for hours. The creature, he had started thinking of it as he, for some reason, seemed more alert now. The labored breathing had eased somewhat, though the damaged wing still hung uselessly. Marcus sat back on his heels, exhausted. I've done what I can with what I have. You need real medical attention, but I don't know who I could call who would believe this, let alone help. The creature's golden eyes fixed on his face, and Marcus had the strange sensation that he was being studied, evaluated. Then, the being did something that made Marcus's blood run cold with wonder. It spoke. The voice was deep, resonant, and clearly struggling with unfamiliar sounds. You help me. Why? Marcus nearly fell backward in shock. You can talk. Yes, the creature replied slowly, as if each word was an effort. I am Thane Commander Zalex of the Dracorian Imperial Navy. Why do you aid me, small one? I am unknown to your kind. Marcus found his voice after several false starts. Because you needed help. That's what people do. At least, that's what they should do. Zalex's massive head tilted slightly, studying Marcus with those unsettling golden eyes. Your species is different than we were told. I am in your debt, human. Marcus, he said automatically. My name is Marcus Chun. Marcus Chun, Zalex repeated carefully. I will remember this name. But you must know, my enemies will come looking for me. If they find me here, your life will be in great danger. I should leave your territory to protect you. Marcus looked at the damaged wing and the still bleeding wounds. You're not going anywhere in that condition. Besides, this is my land. Anyone who wants to cause trouble here will have to go through me. Something that might have been amusement flickered in Zalex's eyes. You would stand against a Starfleet, Marcus Chun, even knowing you could not win. I've been farming this land for 10 years, Marcus said firmly. I've fought drought, floods, storms, banks, and government bureaucrats. I'm still here. I don't scare easy. Zalex was quiet for a long moment. Your species truly is remarkable. I begin to understand why the High Command fears you. Fears us? Marcus asked. Why would anyone fear humans? We can't even get along with each other most of the time. That is a conversation for another time, Zalex said, his voice growing weaker. For now, I must rest. The healing sleep comes upon me. When I wake, we will speak more. Wait, Marcus said urgently. You said your enemies might come looking. How much time do we have? Zalex's eyes were already closing. Perhaps one day. Perhaps less. They will track my ship's energy signature. I am sorry, Marcus Chun. I have brought danger to your peaceful world. The great dragon's breathing deepened and slowed as he fell into what Marcus hoped was a healing sleep rather than something worse. The farmer sat in his damaged wheat field as darkness fell, staring at the most incredible sight he had ever witnessed. Marcus Chun had always been a practical man. He fixed what was broken, helped his neighbors, and minded his own business. But as he looked at the wounded alien warrior sleeping in his field, he realized his quiet life was about to become anything but ordinary. He stood up, every muscle aching from the hours of work, and walked back to his truck. There were preparations to make. If trouble was coming to his farm, he would be ready for it. He had given his word to help Zalex, and Marcus Chun had never broken his word to anyone. As he drove back to his farmhouse, Marcus couldn't help but smile grimly. His grandfather had always said that the Chun family farm was worth fighting for. Tomorrow, he might have to prove just how much he meant those words. The stars were coming out as Marcus reached his house, the same stars he had looked at every night of his life. But now he knew that somewhere among them, hostile ships were searching for the wounded warrior he had promised to protect. Marcus Chun was just a farmer, but he was about to show the galaxy what that really meant. Marcus woke before dawn, as he had every morning for 10 years. But today felt different. Today he had an alien warrior sleeping in his backfield, and hostile ships somewhere in space hunting for that same warrior. As he dressed in his usual work clothes, Marcus wondered if he was losing his mind. Maybe the stress of the failing farm had finally gotten to him. Those doubts vanished the moment he drove his pickup over the hill and saw Zalex's massive form still resting in the crater. The dragon-like alien was real, breathing steadily in what appeared to be deep sleep. The wounds Marcus had cleaned the night before looked better in the morning light, though the damaged wing remained a serious concern. Marcus had spent most of the night planning. If enemy ships were coming, he needed to be prepared. His grandfather had served in Korea and had taught Marcus that preparation was the difference between victory and defeat. A farmer might not seem like much compared to space-traveling warriors, but Marcus had advantages they probably wouldn't expect. He unloaded supplies from his truck, camouflage netting borrowed from his hunting gear, his grandfather's old military field radio, extra ammunition for his rifle, and several thermoses of coffee. If he was going to defend his land, he would do it properly. Zalex stirred as Marcus approached with the camouflage netting. The great golden eyes opened and fixed on the farmer with what might have been surprise. "You remained," Zalex observed, his voice stronger than the night before. "I thought perhaps you would flee during the darkness. Most sensible creatures would. I told you this is my land," Marcus replied, beginning to drape the netting over Zalex's massive form. "Besides, I've never been accused of being sensible. How do you feel?" Zalex attempted to flex his damaged wing and winced. "Better, thanks to your aid, but still unable to fly. The wing will heal, but not for many days." He paused, watching Marcus work. "What are you doing, Marcus-chun?" "Hiding you," Marcus explained, adjusting the netting to break up Zalex's distinctive silhouette. "From above, you should look more like rocks and dirt now. At least, I hope so." "You plan to fight," Zalex said. It was not a question. "If necessary." Marcus stepped back to examine his work. "How good are their sensors? Will they be able to detect you through this?" Zalex considered this seriously. The Korthax use thermal and energy detection primarily. The netting will help with visual scanning, but my body heat and the residual energy from my armor will eventually give away my position. We have perhaps 6 hours before their scans become detailed enough to locate me precisely. Then, we better make those 6 hours count. Marcus pulled out his field radio and began adjusting the frequency. "I called in some help." "Other humans?" Zalex asked with interest. "My neighbors. The Hendersons own the farm to the north, the Kowalskis to the east. Bill Mason runs cattle on the south section. When someone's in trouble around here, folks come running." As if summoned by his words, the sound of approaching vehicles reached them. 3 pickup trucks bounced across the field, raising clouds of dust in the morning air. Marcus waved them over to a position behind the hill, out of sight from above. The first truck disgorged Bill Mason, a weathered rancher in his 60s who had served 2 tours in Vietnam. The second held Tom Henderson and his eldest son Jake, both carrying hunting rifles. The third brought Stan Kowalski and his brother Pete, along with what looked like half an arsenal. "Marcus," Bill called out as he approached, "you said on the radio you had some kind of trouble coming. What's the situation?" Marcus led them to where they could see Zalex without exposing themselves to aerial observation. The reactions were predictable: stunned silence, followed by creative profanity from Stan Kowalski, and a low whistle from Bill Mason. "Well," Bill said finally, "I've seen some strange things in my time, but this takes the cake." "He friendly. His name is Zalex," Marcus explained. "He's a warrior from some kind of space military. His ship crashed, and he's wounded. The problem is his enemies are coming to finish him off." How many enemies?" Jake Henderson asked, checking his rifle with practiced efficiency. Marcus looked at Zalex, who had been listening to the exchange with obvious interest. "How many ships should we expect?" "A Korthax strike squadron," Zalex replied, his deep voice causing several of the men to step back involuntarily. 3 vessels, each carrying perhaps 20 warriors. They are ruthless fighters, but they underestimate what they call primitive species. 60 enemy combatants, Bill summarized grimly, against 6 farmers with hunting rifles. "I've faced worse odds, but not by much." 7 fighters, Zalex corrected. "I can still use my weapon, though I cannot fly." The alien warrior gestured to a device lying nearby that looked like a rifle designed for someone with very large hands. My plasma rifle has sufficient charge for perhaps 50 shots. Pete Kowalski was examining Zalex's weapon with obvious fascination. Mind if I ask what that thing can do? It can burn through 12 inches of hardened steel, Zalex replied matter-of-factly. Okay then, Pete said, grinning. I like our chances better already. Marcus spread out a hand-drawn map of his farm on the hood of his truck. If they're coming in ships, they'll probably land in the main field where there's room to maneuver. That gives us the high ground here on the ridge. We can set up overlapping fields of fire and use the farm building for cover. Bill studied the map with professional interest. Good thinking. We'll want to channel them into a kill zone. Tom, you, and Jake take the barn. Pete and Stan, the equipment shed gives you a good angle. Marcus, you, and I will stay here with our alien friend. There is something else you should know, Zalex interjected. The Korthax have energy shields that can stop most projectile weapons. However, their shields are designed to stop plasma bolts and particle beams. Your primitive kinetic weapons may be more effective than you realize. Stan Kowalski laughed harshly. Primitive? This here is a .30-06 that's dropped everything from deer to grizzly bears. We'll see how primitive it is. Over the next several hours, the small group of farmers transformed Marcus's land into a fortress. They positioned vehicles to create defensive barriers, set up ammunition caches, and establish communication protocols using their hunting radios. Zalex contributed tactical advice, explaining the likely Korthax assault patterns and weak points in their armor. As the sun climbed higher, Marcus found himself amazed at how quickly his peaceful neighbors had transformed into a military unit. These were men who had served their country, raised families, and worked hard their entire lives. They faced the impossible with the same steady determination they brought to everything else. Contact! Jake Henderson's voice crackled over the radio from his position in the barn. 3 ships coming in from the northwest. They're big, Marcus. Really big. Marcus looked through his binoculars and felt his stomach clench. The ships were massive wedge-shaped vessels that moved with impossible silence. They settled into his main field like enormous birds of prey, their hulls gleaming with an oily iridescence. Range to targets? Bill asked calmly. 400 yards to the nearest ship, Tom Henderson replied. Hatches opened on the alien vessels, and figures began emerging. Even at a distance, Marcus could see they were humanoid, but wrong somehow. Too tall, moving with predatory grace. They wore armor similar to Zalex's, but darker, more menacing. 63 hostiles, Jake counted. They're spreading out in search formation. One of the alien soldiers near the lead ship raised a device and began sweeping it in a slow arc. Marcus realized it was scanning for energy signatures. They'll find us soon, Zalex warned, raising his massive plasma rifle. They have located my armor's residual energy signature. Then, we don't wait for them to get closer, Bill decided. All units, weapons free. Take them down. The morning air erupted with the sharp crack of rifle fire. Marcus had expected the aliens to be fast, but he was unprepared for just how fast they were. The Korthax moved like liquid lightning, diving for cover and returning fire with weapons that sent bolts of searing energy across the field. Shields are active, Stan reported as a shot sparked off shimmering barriers around several aliens. But they're not perfect. I got one that was moving too fast for the shield to adjust. Zalex's plasma rifle spoke with a deep thrumming sound, and one of the alien warriors simply disappeared in a flash of superheated air. Aim for the ones who are running, he advised. Their shields cannot compensate for rapid movement. The battle developed into a deadly game of cat and mouse. The Korthax were superior fighters individually, but they had made a critical error in underestimating human tactics. The farmers used every piece of cover, every fold in the ground, every trick learned from a lifetime of hunting in these fields. Marcus found himself crouched behind his tractor, trading shots with an alien warrior who had taken position behind one of his fence posts. The creature's energy bolts sizzled past his head, close enough to singe his hair. Marcus waited, patient as any hunter, until the alien moved to get a better angle. His rifle cracked once, and the Korthax tumbled backward. "Nice shot," Zalex rumbled approvingly. 30 years of hunting prairie dogs," Marcus replied, ejecting the spent cartridge. "Same principle, bigger target." The aliens began to adapt, using coordinated movements and concentrated fire to pressure the defenders. But every time they tried to advance, they met withering fire from the farmers who knew every inch of their ground. "They're falling back to their ships," Tom Henderson reported. "Looks like they're calling for backup." Marcus saw energy building around the communication arrays on the alien vessels and realized what was about to happen. "They're going to call an orbital bombardment," he said grimly. "No," Zalex said with satisfaction. "They cannot risk destroying the area completely. They need proof of my death to present to their commanders. They will call for more ground troops." As if to confirm his words, 2 more ships descended from the sky, larger than the first 3. These vessels disgorged not just warriors, but what looked like heavy weapons teams and combat vehicles. Marcus watched the enemy reinforcements deploy and felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. They had fought well, but now they faced impossible odds. He looked at his neighbors, these good men who had come to help a stranger defend his land, and wondered if he had doomed them all. "Boys," Bill Mason's voice came steady over the radio. "Looks like we're about to find out what we're really made of." Marcus checked his ammunition and prepared for the second wave. Whatever happened next, the Korthax would learn that humans did not surrender easily. His grandfather would have been proud. The second wave of Korthax forces was unlike anything Marcus could have imagined. The new ships had brought not just more warriors, but massive 4-legged war machines that moved across his fields like mechanical spiders. Each machine carried what looked like cannon mounted on their backs, and energy weapons that hummed with barely contained power. "Those are siege walkers," Zalex explained grimly as he watched the deployment through his enhanced vision. "Each one can level a small city. They are meant to crush any resistance." "Well," Stan Kowalski muttered from his position behind the equipment shed, "this just got a whole lot more interesting." Marcus counted at least 40 more Korthax warriors spreading out in professional formation, supported by 6 of the walking war machines. The aliens had learned from the first assault. They were taking no chances with the primitive humans who had bloodied their noses. "Movement to the south," Pete Kowalski reported over the radio. "Looks like they're trying to flank us through the creek bed." "I see them," Jake Henderson confirmed from the barn. "At least 8 contacts moving through the tall grass." Marcus realized the aliens were attempting a coordinated assault from multiple directions. They would pin the defenders with frontal fire from the war machines, while flanking forces eliminated them piece by piece. It was professional, methodical, and probably unstoppable. "Zalex," Marcus said quietly, "is there any way to even the odds? Some weakness in those machines." The alien warrior considered this, his golden eyes studying the approaching enemy. The siege walkers have heavily armored fronts, but their rear sections house the power cores. A sufficient kinetic impact to the power coupling might cause catastrophic failure. "Might," Bill Mason asked dryly. "Or it might simply anger them," Zalex admitted. "Korthax engineering is quite robust." Before anyone could respond, the siege walkers opened fire. Bolts of concentrated energy slammed into the ridge, vaporizing chunks of earth and stone. The barn where Tom and Jake Henderson had taken position erupted in flames as one of the massive weapons found its mark. "Henderson team, report." Marcus shouted into his radio. "We're alive." Tom's voice crackled back, filled with smoke and pain. "But we're moving. This position is compromised." Marcus watched his barn, the barn his grandfather had built with his own hands, collapse into burning ruins. Something cold and hard settled in his chest. These aliens had come to his land, threatened his friends, and now destroyed his family's legacy. That was a mistake they were going to regret. "New plan," Marcus announced, surprising everyone, including himself, with the calm in his voice. We're going to take out those walkers. How exactly do you propose we do that? Pete asked skeptically. Our rifles aren't exactly anti-tank weapons. Marcus was already moving toward his equipment shed, the one building the aliens hadn't targeted yet. Remember what I do for a living. I move tons of rock and earth every year. I've got the tools for the job. Inside the shed, Marcus uncovered his pride and joy, a modified John Deere tractor that he had spent years perfecting. It was designed for the heaviest farm work, with reinforced armor plating he had added after too many accidents with flying debris. More importantly, it had a front-mounted hydraulic system capable of lifting several tons. You're not seriously thinking of ramming those things, Bill said as Marcus climbed into the cab. Not ramming, Marcus corrected, starting the massive diesel engine. I'm going to get under one of them and flip it over. Zalex said the power core is in the rear. If I can expose the bottom, that's suicide, Stan protested. Maybe, Marcus admitted, but this is my land, my family's land, and I'll be damned if I let some alien bullies take it without a fight. Zalex struggled to his feet, favoring his damaged wing. Marcus Chun, this plan has merit, but you cannot succeed alone. I will provide covering fire and distraction. You can barely move, Marcus pointed out. I am Thane Commander of the Dracorian Imperial Navy, Zalex replied with fierce pride. I have fought in 17 campaigns across 12 star systems. I will not cower behind cover while a brave human sacrifices himself for my sake. Before Marcus could argue further, Zalex limped toward the edge of their position and raised his plasma rifle. The weapon discharged with a sound like thunder, and one of the siege walkers staggered as superheated energy punched through its forward armor. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every Korthax weapon turned toward Zalex's position, filling the air with deadly energy bolts. But the alien warrior's sacrifice had given Marcus the opening he needed. The tractor roared down the hillside at full throttle, its diesel engine screaming. Marcus had removed the safety governors years ago for heavy pulling work, and now the machine moved faster than any tractor had a right to. Energy bolts sizzled past him as the Korthax tried to adjust their fire. The nearest siege walker turned to face this new threat, but Marcus had spent 30 years operating heavy equipment. He knew how machines moved, how they balanced, where their weaknesses lay. At the last second, he spun the wheel hard left and slid the tractor sideways under the walker's belly. The hydraulic lift engaged with a mechanical roar, catching the War Machine Center section and lifting with the force of 20 tons. The siege walker toppled sideways with a crash that shook the ground, its legs thrashing helplessly in the air. Now, Marcus shouted into his radio as he scrambled from the tractor cab. The concentrated fire from his neighbors found every weak point Zalex had described. The overturned walker's power core, exposed and vulnerable, took hit after hit from .30-06 rounds until something critical failed. The machine vanished in a ball of blue-white fire that left spots dancing in Marcus's vision. But his triumph was short-lived. The remaining 5 walkers had locked onto his position, and energy beams converged on the overturned wreckage where he had taken cover. Marcus felt the heat wash over him as his family's tractor melted into slag. Marcus! Bill's voice over the radio was urgent. Get out of there! But there was nowhere to run. Marcus found himself pinned in a crater, surrounded by molten metal, while 5 war machines closed in for the kill. He checked his rifle. 3 rounds left. Not much, but he had never been one to quit. That was when the sky began to roar. At first Marcus thought it was more Korthax reinforcements. But the sound was wrong, deeper, more primal. Something vast and powerful was descending through the clouds above his farm. A ship broke through the overcast, larger than any of the Korthax vessels. Its hull was blue-silver like Zalex's scales, marked with symbols that seemed to shift in the light. The ship moved with predatory grace, and Marcus realized he was looking at a Dracorian warship. The 7th Fleet, Zalex said with deep satisfaction, his voice carrying clearly across the battlefield. My distress beacon finally reached them. The The Dracorian ship spoke with weapons that made the Korthax siege walkers look like toys. Beams of coherent energy lanced down from orbit, precisely targeting each enemy position. In seconds, the remaining war machines were nothing but glowing craters in Marcus's wheat field. Landing craft deployed from the warship, disgorging Dracorian warriors that looked like Zalex but smaller, more agile. They wore powered armor that gleamed in the sunlight and carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. The remaining Korthax forces, caught between the human defenders above and Dracorian reinforcements below, found themselves in an impossible position. The battle ended with shocking speed. Without their siege walkers, the Korthax infantry stood no chance against professional Dracorian military forces. Those who could reach their ships fled into space. Those who could not surrendered or died fighting. Marcus climbed out of his crater on unsteady legs, hardly believing he had survived. Around him, his neighbors emerged from their positions, all looking slightly stunned by the sudden reversal of fortune. A Dracorian officer approached their position, moving with flowing grace despite the heavy armor. Unlike Zalex, this warrior was smaller, more compact, with scales that shifted between green and gold in the sunlight. "I am Wing Commander THYSS of the 7th Fleet," the newcomer announced in accented but clear English. "We received Thane Commander Zalex's distress signal. Are you the humans who provided him aid?" "We are," Marcus replied, suddenly, aware of how he must look, covered in dirt and soot, clutching a farmer's rifle, standing amid the burning wreckage of his equipment. THYSS studied him for a long moment, then performed what Marcus realized was a formal bow. "Then, you have the gratitude of the Dracorian Empire. Thane Commander Zalex is one of our most valued officers. To lose him would have been unfortunate. He fought alongside us," Marcus said firmly. "Saved our lives more than once. We were honored to stand with him." Something shifted in THYSS's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or respect. Most unusual. In our experience, primitive species flee from conflict with the Korthax. They do not stand and fight. "We're not most species," Bill Mason said dryly, approaching with his rifle still in his hands. "And we don't much like being called primitive." THYSS tilted her head, studying the weathered rancher. "No," she said thoughtfully. "I can see that you are not. This will make for a most interesting report to the High Command." Marcus looked around his farm, at the burning buildings, the cratered fields, the twisted wreckage of his equipment. Everything his family had built over 3 generations was destroyed. But somehow he found himself smiling. "So," he said to THYSS, "what happens now?" The Wing Commander's expression was unreadable. "Now, Marcus Chin of Earth, we must speak with your leaders. This incident will have consequences. The Korthax attacked a world under the protection of the Dracorian Empire without provocation. This cannot be allowed to stand." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cooling air. "Protection? What protection? We didn't even know you existed until yesterday." THYSS exchanged a glance with Zalex, who had limped over to join them. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "it is time for humanity to learn its place in the larger galaxy. You have proven today that you are far more than we believe possible." As Dracorian medical teams began treating Zalex's wounds and technical crews surveyed the battle damage, Marcus realized that his quiet life as a farmer was truly over. The galaxy had noticed Earth, and there would be no going back. But as he looked at his neighbors, good men who had risked everything to help a stranger, Marcus felt a surge of pride. Let the galaxy come. Humanity would be ready. 3 weeks after the battle, Marcus sat in a conference room in Washington, D.C. that was far fancier than anything he had ever seen. The mahogany table was larger than his kitchen, and the men and women seated around it wore uniforms with more stars and ribbons than he could count. At the head of the table sat the Secretary of Defense, a stern woman who had been asking questions for the past 2 hours. "Let me understand this correctly, Mr. Chun," Secretary Williams said, reviewing the thick file in front of her. "You encountered a wounded alien warrior on your farm, provided medical assistance, and then defended him against an attack by hostile forces. Is that accurate? Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied, still uncomfortable in the borrowed suit they had insisted he wear. Though when you put it like that, it sounded a lot simpler than it felt at the time. And you made this decision without consulting any government authority? General Morrison asked. The man's tone suggested he found this deeply troubling. There wasn't time to consult anyone, Marcus explained patiently. Zalex was badly hurt, and he said his enemies would be coming. I had to decide whether to help him or not. You could have called the authorities, Admiral Chin pointed out. The proper channels exist for a reason. Marcus looked at the Admiral, who shared his last name, but clearly came from a different world. With respect, sir, by the time I convinced anyone that I had a wounded alien in my field, Zalex would have been dead, and his enemies would have gotten away clean. Sometimes you have to act on your own judgment. Wing Commander HFY Sess, who sat at the far end of the table as the Dracorian representative, made a sound that might have been amusement. If I may interject, she said smoothly, the Thane Commander's survival was critical to our understanding of Korthak's expansion patterns. Mr. Chin's quick action prevented a significant intelligence loss. That's not the point, General Morrison said sharply. The point is that a civilian made contact with hostile alien forces without authorization. This could have triggered an interstellar incident. It did trigger an interstellar incident, Marcus pointed out. The Korthaks attacked first. We just defended ourselves. Secretary Williams held up a hand to stop the brewing argument. The question now is what we do moving forward. Wing Commander THYSS, your government has made some rather extraordinary claims about Earth status. THYSS nodded gracefully. The Dracorian Empire has designated Earth as a protectorate world. This grants your species certain rights and protections under galactic law. Without consulting us, Admiral Chin noted coldly. The designation was implemented after careful observation, THYSS explained. Your species showed potential for development, but was deemed too primitive for direct contact. The protectorate status was meant to prevent exploitation by hostile powers. Like the Korthaks, Secretary Williams said. Indeed, the Korthaks Empire has been expanding aggressively, enslaving or exterminating species they consider inferior. The protectorate designation should have prevented them from entering this system. General Morrison leaned forward. Should have. The Korthaks chose to ignore galactic law, THYSS admitted. They believed they could eliminate the evidence of their transgression. They did not expect to encounter resistance from humans, nor did they anticipate that Thane Commander Zalex would survive to report their violation. Marcus found himself thinking of his ruined farm, his destroyed barn, the crater where his tractor had been vaporized. So, what happens now? Do we just go back to pretending the galaxy doesn't exist? That is no longer possible, THYSS said firmly. Humanity has demonstrated combat capability far beyond our initial assessments. The High Command is reconsidering your status. What kind of reconsideration? Secretary Williams asked carefully. Full membership in the Galactic Council, THYSS replied, causing a stir around the table. With all the rights and responsibilities that entails. And if we refuse? Admiral Chin asked. THYSS's expression became diplomatic. That would be inadvisable. The galaxy is a dangerous place for isolated species. The Korthaks attack proves this. You need allies, and we need partners who can think creatively under pressure. Marcus listened to the political maneuvering with growing impatience. These people were talking about humanity's future as if it was just another bureaucratic decision. They had not stood in a crater surrounded by alien war machines, trusting their lives to neighbors and principles. If I may ask a question, Marcus interrupted, causing every head to turn toward him. What exactly does membership in this Galactic Council mean for ordinary people, for farmers and shopkeepers and teachers? THYSS considered this thoughtfully. It means access to technologies that will transform your civilization. Medical advances that could eliminate disease and extend lifespans. Energy systems that would end your environmental problems. Agricultural techniques that could feed 10 times your current population. And the cost? Marcus pressed. Responsibility, THYSS said simply. Member species contribute to galactic security and stability. This includes military service, technological sharing, and adherence to galactic law. Military service? General Morrison's interest was clearly piqued. The galaxy faces many threats beyond the Corthax, THYSS explained. Rogue AI networks, reality-devouring entities, species that view all other life as food sources. The Council maintains forces to deal with such dangers. Marcus thought about Zalex, wounded and far from home, fighting unknown enemies in the darkness between stars. And you want humans to join that fight? We want humans because of what you demonstrated on your farm, THYSS said earnestly. Most species, when faced with overwhelming odds, will flee or surrender. Humans stood their ground and found a way to win. That is precisely the quality the galaxy needs more of. Secretary Williams shuffled through her papers. This is all very interesting, but I have practical concerns. How do we explain this to the American people? To the world? The existence of aliens, galactic governments, and interstellar wars is not exactly everyday news. Carefully, THYSS suggested, perhaps beginning with the story of a farmer who showed kindness to a stranger and stood up to bullies. Such tales resonate across species lines. Marcus found himself smiling despite the circumstances. You want to use me as a poster boy for joining your galactic club? I want to use your example to show that humanity is ready for a larger role in the universe, THYSS corrected. The Council is not a club, Mr. Chun. It is a community of species working together for mutual survival and prosperity. And if humanity says no? Admiral Chun asked again. THYSS's expression grew serious. Then you will face the galaxy alone. The Corthax will return in greater numbers. Other hostile powers will take notice of your world. You have resources they want, and no protection beyond your own weapons. But we do have weapons, General Morrison pointed out. We hurt the Corthax badly with simple kinetic firearms. You caught them by surprise, THYSS acknowledged. They underestimated you, as we all did. That mistake will not be repeated. Next time they come, they will bring sufficient force to sterilize your planet from orbit. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Marcus thought about his neighbors, the good people who had risked everything to help a wounded stranger. They deserved better than to face annihilation because their leaders were too proud or too cautious to accept help. There's another factor to consider, Marcus said quietly. Zalex told me that his people feared humanity. If we're so dangerous, why do you want us as allies instead of enemies? THYSS actually smiled at that question. Because fear and respect are often the same thing viewed from different angles. We fear humanity because you do not behave as we expect intelligent species to behave. You take risks that seem insane, you refuse to surrender when logic demands it, and you somehow make impossible victories look routine. She paused, studying the faces around the table. But we also respect those qualities because we know the galaxy needs them. There are challenges coming that will require exactly the kind of thinking that led Marcus Chun to charge a war machine with a farm tractor. What kind of challenges? Secretary Williams asked. That, THYSS said diplomatically, is classified until you achieve full council membership. But I will say this, the Corthax are among the lesser threats we face. Marcus felt a chill at those words. If the alien forces that had nearly killed him and his neighbors were considered minor problems, what horrors lurked in the depths of space? I have a proposal, Marcus said suddenly, surprising himself as much as everyone else. Give me a chance to talk to Zalex before we make any final decisions. He fought alongside us, bled with us. If we're going to trust anyone's word about this Galactic Council, it should be his. THYSS nodded approvingly. The Thane commander is currently recovering at our embassy facility in orbit. I believe he would welcome a visit from his human comrades. Orbit? Marcus asked weakly. Do not worry, THYSS assured him. Dracorian transportation is quite safe. You will find the experience illuminating. As the meeting broke up into smaller groups discussing technical details and political implications, Marcus found himself staring out the window at the Washington skyline. Somewhere up there, beyond the blue sky, Zalex was waiting, and beyond him lay a galaxy full of wonders and terrors that humanity was only beginning to imagine. Marcus Chun had always been a practical man who solved problems one at a time. Now he faced the biggest problem of his life, helping his species decide whether to step boldly into the unknown or remain safely isolated in ignorance. But as he thought about his destroyed farm and the friends who had stood with him against impossible odds, Marcus realized the decision was already made. Humanity would not hide from the galaxy. They would face it head-on, just as they always had. The only question was whether they would face it alone or with allies at their side. Marcus had thought the Dracorian shuttle was impressive until he saw the embassy ship in orbit. The vessel was easily 10 times larger than anything humanity had ever put in space, its hull gleaming with the same blue-silver scales as Zalex's hide. Graceful curves and flowing lines made it look more grown than built, as if some cosmic dragon had coiled itself around a framework of advanced technology. "Welcome aboard the Nexus Harmony," Wing Commander THYSS said as they disembarked in a hangar bay that could have held 3 football fields. "The Thane Commander is waiting in the recovery wing." Marcus followed her through corridors that seemed designed for beings much larger than humans. The walls curved overhead in organic patterns, and soft light emanated from surfaces that looked like polished gemstones. Everything spoke of a civilization that had mastered both technology and artistry. They passed other Dracorians in the corridors, each one pausing to nod respectfully to THYSS. Marcus noticed that several of them studied him with obvious curiosity, golden eyes tracking his movement with interest that bordered on fascination. "You're something of a celebrity," THYSS observed, noticing his discomfort. "Word of the battle has spread through the fleet. Many of my people are eager to meet the humans who stood against a Korthak siege squadron and won." "We didn't exactly win," Marcus pointed out. "You folks showed up just in time to save our skins." "You survived long enough for rescue to arrive," THYSS corrected. "Against those odds, survival itself was victory. Do not underestimate the achievement." The recovery wing turned out to be more like a luxury hotel than any hospital Marcus had ever seen. Zalex occupied a room that could have housed his entire farmhouse, with panoramic windows offering a stunning view of Earth below. The great dragon was resting on what looked like a massive cushioned platform, his damaged wings supported by some kind of energy field that shimmered with soft light. "Marcus Chun," Zalex's deep voice boomed with genuine pleasure as they entered. "I wondered when you would visit. How do you find space travel?" "Quieter than I expected," Marcus replied, approaching the recovery platform. "How's the wing?" Zalex flexed the damaged appendage carefully, and Marcus was amazed to see that it moved normally. "Dracorian medicine is quite advanced. I will be flying again within days. Though I admit, I find myself reluctant to leave this system." "Oh," THYSS asked with interest. "I have grown fond of this world and its remarkable inhabitants," Zalex explained. "The High Command should know that my assessment of human potential has been revised upward considerably." Marcus pulled up a chair that had obviously been scaled for human use and settled beside the great alien's platform. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. Your people want us to join their Galactic Council. As someone who's fought alongside humans, what do you really think? Should we trust them?" Zalex was quiet for a long moment, his golden eyes studying Marcus's face. "That is a complex question, my friend. The Galactic Council is not perfect. Few institutions spanning multiple species and star systems could be. There's politics, bureaucracy, and occasional corruption." "That doesn't sound encouraging," Marcus said dryly. But Zalex continued, "It is also the only thing standing between civilized species and the chaos that lurks in the dark between stars. Without the Council's protection and coordination, species like the Korthax would have conquered or exterminated most of the galaxy long ago. And you think humanity belongs in that fight? I think humanity belongs in a position of leadership within that fight, Zalex replied firmly. What I witnessed on your farm was not just courage, Marcus Chun. It was the kind of adaptive thinking that the galaxy desperately needs. HYSS tilted her head curiously. How so? Every species develops certain patterns of thought based on their evolutionary history, Zalex explained. Dracorians are predators. We think in terms of direct confrontation and overwhelming force. The Korthax are hive-minded. They value numerical superiority and coordinated assault. Most council species follow similar patterns. And humans? Marcus asked. Humans think sideways, Zalex said with something that might have been amusement. When faced with superior force, you do not retreat or accept defeat. You change the rules of engagement. Marcus Chun charged a war machine with agricultural equipment. That is not tactics any military academy teaches, yet worked. Marcus thought about that day, remembering the desperate moment when he had decided to flip the siege walker. I just used the tools I had available. Exactly. Zalex's enthusiasm was infectious. You saw a problem that required solving and found a solution using resources your enemies never considered. That adaptability could be invaluable in the conflicts ahead. What conflicts? Marcus asked. THYSS mentioned greater threats than the Korthax, but she wouldn't give details. Zalex and THYSS exchanged glances. Perhaps, THYSS said carefully. It is time for a more complete briefing. But, I warn you, the information is disturbing. Marcus settled back in his chair. I've seen alien war machines try to kill my neighbors. I think I can handle disturbing. THYSS activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room with a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Thousands of points of light marked star systems, connected by glowing lines that showed trade routes and political boundaries. This is the known galaxy, she began. The inner systems are controlled by council species, about 40% of habitable worlds. The outer rim is largely unexplored or controlled by non-council powers like the Korthax. And beyond the rim? Marcus asked. The map zoomed out, showing dark areas where no lights existed. Unknown space, Zalex said grimly. For the past century, we have detected signals from those regions, transmissions that suggest vast intelligences with technologies far beyond our understanding. Some of these signals have been hostile. Hostile how? Star systems going silent overnight, THYSS explained. Entire species vanishing without trace. Energy signatures that suggest weapons capable of destroying planets. We believe something is moving in the dark spaces between galaxies and is coming this way. Marcus felt a chill despite the comfortable temperature of the room. How long do we have? Unknown, Zalex admitted. Perhaps centuries, perhaps decades. But when it arrives, the galaxy will need every advantage it can find. Human tactical thinking could provide insights that save billions of lives. Or if it could get us all killed, Marcus pointed out. That is possible, THYSS acknowledged. But remaining isolated will certainly get you killed. The threats we face will not ignore Earth simply because you choose not to participate in galactic affairs. Marcus studied the holographic map, trying to comprehend the scale of what they were describing. Billions of inhabited worlds, countless species, and, somewhere in the darkness beyond, something that could destroy it all. What would membership actually mean? He asked. Day to day, for ordinary people? Initially, very little, THYSS replied. We would establish embassies, begin technology transfers, and recruit volunteers for specialized units. Your governments would work with the Council on resource allocation and strategic planning. And eventually, Earth would become a full partner in galactic civilization, Zalex said. Your people would travel between stars, settle new worlds, contribute to the great projects that bind the galaxy together. Marcus thought about his destroyed farm, his neighbors who had risked everything for a stranger, the simple life he had lost forever. And if I recommended against joining? If I told my government that the risks were too great? Then humanity would face the future alone, HYSS said simply. And when the darkness comes, you would meet it with only your own strength to rely upon. Which might not be enough, Zalex added gently. I have seen what humans can accomplish when they work together. But some threats require more than courage and ingenuity. Marcus stood and walked to the panoramic windows, looking down at the blue marble of Earth floating in the cosmic void. From this distance, the planet looked so small, so fragile. It was hard to believe that billions of people lived down there, going about their daily lives unaware that their future hung in the balance. I keep thinking about something you said, Zalex, Marcus said finally. You mentioned that the High Command feared humanity. But you also said we were remarkable. Which is it? Both, Zalex replied without hesitation. Fear and admiration often go hand in hand when encountering something truly unprecedented. Humans frightened us because you do not fit our models of how intelligent species behave. But that same unpredictability is why we need you. Marcus turned back to face his alien friends. If we join this council, will we be equal partners or junior members expected to follow orders? The council operates on merit and capability, THYSS explained. Species that contribute more resources and expertise have greater influence. Humanity's unique perspective would give you significant voice in strategic decisions. And the military service you mentioned? Voluntary at first, Zalex said, though I suspect many humans will find the challenge appealing. The galaxy needs explorers, protectors, and problem solvers. Your species excels at all three. Marcus walked back to his chair and sat down, feeling the weight of decision pressing on his shoulders. He was just a farmer from Kansas, yet somehow the fate of his entire species seemed to rest on his recommendation. There's one more thing I need to know, he said quietly. If we join, and this darkness from beyond the rim comes calling, will humanity be expected to stand and fight no matter the odds? Zalex's golden eyes blazed with fierce pride. Marcus Chun, if that day comes, I believe humanity will not need to be asked to fight. You will stand because that is who you are, just as you stood when the Korthax came to your farm. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding finally, crystallizing in his mind. Then, I'll give my government my recommendation. Humanity should join the Galactic Council. And your reasons? THYSS asked curiously. Marcus smiled, thinking of Bill Mason and the Henderson brothers, of Stan and Pete Kowalski, of all the good people who had come running when trouble threatened their neighbor. Because hiding from the galaxy won't keep us safe, he said simply. And because when the darkness comes, we're going to need friends to stand with us. Just like you stood with us when the Korthax came calling. As he looked out at the stars scattered across the infinite night, Marcus Chun realized that his quiet life as a farmer was truly over. But in its place, something far greater was beginning. Humanity was about to take its first steps into a larger universe. And whatever came next, they would face it together. The Dragon Farmers' War was over. The human chapter of galactic history was just beginning.